Hello and welcome back. Keely and Mike here from Long Range with the Lillys. If you are new, thank you guys for coming on. Today we have a special guest. This is Chris Gittings, and we're going to talk to Chris Gittings about a couple of things. So you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, I think for our viewers that don't know us, I think it's best if we start out with just, a quick introduction about yourself. And I think most of our viewers know, if they know you from our shooting side, but you have a very specific day job as well.
Yeah, it's very different. I get, when I mention it, people don't believe me, or they say, oh, like Jerry Maguire. I joke that on my gravestone it'll say, oh, like Jerry Maguire. But my day job is I'm a sports agent. I represent NFL players. I've been doing that now for 23 years. I've owned my own sports agency for about 11.
Okay.
I also, on the side, I own Get Light, which makes a bag fill, which you guys know, and I do write once in a while, very occasionally, for Outdoor Life and Field and Stream.
Sure. And then you also run the Proof sponsored shooters team. So you're our go-to guy for both mentorship and addressing how to be brand ambassadors, which is what kind of prompted this interview. Is we're always hitting you up like, hey Chris, how can we be better brand ambassadors? What is Proof Research or the industry as a whole looking for as a brand ambassador? And I can't really think of anybody that's more qualified to comment than you are. So,
I agree.
How would you describe being a brand ambassador?
Well, I think first of all, it starts with having an understanding and an agreement with the brand that you are going to represent, right? I really try to encourage people, first of all, to give some thought to the brand. Do they really want to be a brand ambassador or
Sure.
not?
Right.
Because it's easy to say, man, who wouldn't want free stuff? Or I'd love some help with my match fees. This is
Right.
killing me.
Yeah.
These are expensive things that we do. But the reality is, down the road, when you start getting those things and there's expectations, you get stress, you get pressure. Sometimes the relationship doesn't work out, or there is no relationship between you and the brand, or there's just all these different things. Or maybe you took the easy, gift and it was from a company, and then you realize, this is the best product, and I don't really believe in this product.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of things that you need to consider before you ever get to brand ambassadorship. The second thing is just having a clear understanding between the brand and the person who's getting sponsored about what the expectations are, and then making sure you can live up to those.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're pretty big on making sure that for communication for us that everything is written. And some people are, oh no, we don't want to have anything written, but.
I think from my perspective, the reason that I harp on that so much is that I feel like most of the times that I've seen relationships sour or things go bad between a sponsored endorser and a company is because of either misunderstood expectations or miscommunicated, or in some cases non-communicated expectations. And that's kind of why we ask for things in writing. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's great, and it doesn't have to be a 7-page contract, right? Even just some bullet points about what both parties are going to do, that just memorializes what the expectations are, what you're going to do and what the brand's going to do, right? That's a simple thing, and then if you need to go back to it, you can do that.
Right.
Okay. So one of the questions I think we get most often is, Mike, Keely, how do we get sponsored?
I really want to be a sponsored shooter.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's because they see how poorly we shoot sometimes, and they think, well, if they're sponsored, I must be good. What am I not doing right? But so if you were to describe the path to getting sponsored or how those relationships develop, what advice would you give those shooters?
Well, first of all, relationship is the key, I believe, first and foremost. That's not always the case, but I would say the vast majority of the sponsorships that happen, it's because a shooter develops a relationship with somebody important in a decision-making capability in a big gun business, right? In a brand. And it's that relationship that starts everything.
Mm-hmm.
To get an email from somebody, we get them all the time, and I feel blessed that people would want to be sponsored by us. But if it's somebody we don't know, then we just don't know them. We don't know who they are. We don't
Right.
know what they're about. We don't know if they use our, we just don't know any of that. So I think having a relationship first and foremost. So recommendation is if you want to be sponsored by a certain company, get in touch with and build a relationship with the people in the company. I did that with Proof. I actually built a relationship with KK Jens before Proof Research actually existed. He built a gun for me, and I used the precursor to Proof barrels. I was one of the last guns that he built. And then right after that, he was one of the founding partners of Proof Research.
Okay.
So, and then I built a relationship with Greg Hamilton. I shot with him, and later down the road, then the Proof team was formed. So, I did that same thing. I built a relationship with Proof before I ever asked to be sponsored by them or to create a team. I think using the product is really important.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not using the product already, then you have to ask yourself why you want to be sponsored by that company, because you need to believe in that product.
Right.
And then have an understanding of what they might want. If you're a good shooter, but you're not influencing anybody, right? Take an extreme example of a great shooter, but somebody who's really quiet maybe and doesn't talk to anybody.
Sure.
Right. Oh,
Somebody
yeah.
who shows up to a match, they win it, they get in their car and they leave, right?
Yeah.
So what's the marketing value of that person? Like, who are they going to reach? We could certainly put them on our Facebook page and say, look, so-and-so won this trophy. That's it. That's all you're ever going to get out of that relationship. Is it worth the product that you're going to give them? I don't know. Depends on the brand and if it is for them or not.
Sure.
But it's less value to a brand than a shooter who comes up to a match, may not even win, but does well, but is a great ambassador. They're easy to talk to. People come up and ask them questions all the time, and they can just talk about anything. I mean, I think those folks are worth more than the shooter who doesn't talk to anybody and wins all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've covered, kind of the path to get sponsored, now let's say you are getting sponsored, like what are the expectations of a sponsored shooter?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you've got to understand that you're there for you have a job, and that job is to sell that product. And if you don't want to be responsible for that, then being sponsored is not for you.
Right.
It's more than just it's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street.
Right.
It's not just about the shooter getting free stuff and, maybe making an Instagram post every now and then or wearing a hat.
Yeah, and I think to add to what we're talking about, I think there's this perception out there, or this misperception, that you're a sponsored shooter and that the heavens open up and just product and money and like everything's just gravy, and it's not necessarily the case. And there's different levels of sponsorships, and with those different levels come different expectations.
Right.
Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I guess so. You could have in our world, the long range world particularly, there's very few people that are getting actual cash. That's pretty rarefied air. Now there are some, and those are great deals. And if they're worth it for the company, then they're worth it for the company. And I've actually been involved in some of those, and I think they're awesome. But the vast majority of the deals are product only, right? And maybe with some reimbursement for match fees and travel expenses and things like that.
Sure.
Under that would be the next level, which is just product. Under that would be a level that's a percentage off of product. So as a shooter, you have to look at that and say, well, if I'm getting 50% off an optic, right, but I can do that for 3 of them in a year, that's not bad. If I'm going to buy those optics anyway, that I can do the math and see what that is for me.
Right.
If it's 50% off of a soft good or something, some bags or whatever,
Right.
that's great, and maybe you need that, and maybe you'll take that to build a relationship with that company, and that if you have a plan for that, right?
Right.
But maybe that just is like doesn't pencil out. Like they want you to do 5 Instagram posts a month, and
Right.
well, this turns out to be about $250 a year.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe you don't want to do that. So anyway, I think with what you're talking about, Mike, is the tiers of like how that works, and there's different expectations, and there should be, and you should just be clear on what that is and make sure you can live up to it.
I think, I listened to a podcast you did with Travis Ashuta, and you guys did a great job of breaking it down there. And you talked about like the Michael Jordan tier,
Right.
and then, you went down from there. If you could draw like correlations to shooting without, maybe naming names, like how would you break that down?
Yeah, I talked about that tier structure in terms of value of what the particular athlete is bringing to the table. So, the Michael Jordan tier in shooting would be somebody who is so dominant, right? Like, and I'll name names like in 3-gun, Dan Warner.
Sure.
I mean, I don't think anybody has beaten Dan in a 3-gun match in maybe ever. Like, and I could be wrong. Sure, we'll get some comments.
Yes. But if you are, we will find out.
Yes.
Right.
A lot of
But
stuff.
if it's happened, he's dominant.
Right.
Like, and so, if you have a shooter or an athlete at that level, you could find value in simply just having him use your product.
Mm-hmm.
That's rarefied air. Okay. The next level would be shooters who win matches and are competitive and are always kind of in the mix. They're on the podium a fair amount. What's their value? Well, if you have some of those shooters and they're not doing a lot of social media, I can think of a shooter who is like that. He's a very quiet guy, but he's a great guy. He's one of my favorite people in the shooting world. Doesn't do much social media.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to get much marketing out of him, but he wins a bunch of matches, and he is a great ambassador because anybody can go talk to him.
Right.
That's a really valuable shooter, right?
Yeah.
Next tier down would be somebody who's good. They're in the top 10, top 15 in a lot of national matches, and maybe they'll get on the podium once in a while, but they're a great salesperson. They go up to people, they talk, they engage people. And I don't mean like just constantly showing product. You don't do that, but
Sure.
Because that's not what we're looking for when I say sales. I mean just reaching out and getting to know people.
And people can tell when like, oh, this is sales pitchy, and it can really turn them off if they can pick up on that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of that middle tier. I think that's a really valuable tier too. Like, there's a lot of shooters. We've got several shooters on our team that would fit in that category. And we might look and say, okay, this person has got a sphere of influence, right? It's a marketing term. Sphere of influence over this group right here. And maybe that group's online, maybe it's geographical, maybe it's somehow or other configured, but they're really important in that sphere, and they're really approachable, and they do well enough that they're respected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then, but below that, you can get down even into a more granular level about somebody who maybe is doesn't shoot national matches, but is got part of a big club, and they're really valuable there. That's a lower level sponsorship, probably just some percentage off of some things, but you can go all the way down and into those levels and find value at each level as a sponsor, as long as you understand what you're getting and there's a plan. I think where companies get into trouble is they don't have a plan, and they're just like, oh, this person's a good shooter, we'll just give them some product.
Right.
We're good.
Yeah.
Right. That's where when Travis and I did that podcast, we flipped it, and then we started to talk about things from the industry perspective as well.
Right.
So what I've noticed, we broke down those tiers and we talked about the elite guy that's just so dominant. But what I've also found and noticed is that winning is not everything. Like, somebody in a lower tier may have more value because of their personality, their sphere of influence, than a guy who is just dominant if he's not the right personality type for your team.
Right.
Especially because I have also noticed that brands have certain personalities,
Absolutely.
for lack of a better way to put it.
Right.
And your personality, even though you're dominant, you're crushing everybody, may not just be in tune with that brand.
Right.
Do you want to care to speak on that kind of at all?
I think that's a great point, Mike. Really. That's another thing that both the brand and the shooter have to be in touch with. Is like, what is that culture? What is that personality? I can think of a shooter years ago was really good, right? Really good, won a lot of matches, but was abrasive. I think most shooters around that shooter would say, yeah, the guy's a jerk. But he won a lot. And I think a lot of brands would look at that shooter and say, yeah, that's not for us. We don't want to put our logo on that shooter. But you could flip that, and there might be some brands that love that. They're flying the pirate flag.
Oh, yes.
We're bad boys. We know it. Yeah, exactly.
We're the Raiders. Of the gun world, And I mean, that Raiders are a great example, right? Like they have a certain brand that they've always had. They took those guys and went and won Super Bowls. You could do the same thing. I think as a shooter, you just have to understand, where are you on that spectrum, right? Are you this shooter or that shooter or somewhere in between? And you have to understand that a savvy brand that is trying to put together a team of people needs to know where on that spectrum they want to be. What's their culture, right?
Right.
And so that's a great point. And maybe just doing a little soul searching. And we talk about this. I talked about this with you guys.
Sure.
Be genuine.
Right.
Yeah. If the brand is not the right fit for you, don't force it, because I think no matter how much you think you're hiding it or your poker face or whatever, it shines through. It always comes out. If you don't love the product that you're representing, it always comes out.
Yeah.
And so what else would you say out there to people trying to be sponsored or are looking for information on being sponsored? Like, is there any resources out there that people can tap into, or just, go shoot, meet people?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think they should have some really honest, candid conversations with people that they might know who are sponsored.
Okay.
I think that's a great place to start. My question would be, do they know somebody who's sponsored, and can they sit down with them and have those conversations? I think talking to some companies, if you can get, like today at the expo, this was a great opportunity to talk to brands. Here at Proof, we had Kelly Strife was here, the VP of Sales and Marketing. That's who I answer to.
Right.
Like,
that's the boss.
She's the boss. So if we're going to add somebody, I make a recommendation. I'd like to add this person, and she either says yes or no. I mean, she's the boss. So it was a perfect opportunity to come and meet Kelly.
Yeah.
For people who were here.
Right.
So if you can go to some of the shows, or SHOT Show's tough. It's
Sure.
You're not going to get Kelly Strife's time at SHOT Show.
No.
Right. She's just so busy with meetings. But that's why this was so special. And there's probably some other shows where you might be able to go to some of those things and meet people. In our world, I'm the one that makes recommendations. So if people want to meet me, I'm out shooting.
Right.
Come up and say hello. I'm happy to talk to people, but get to know people at the brands.
And I think that's an important point. So, like, one of the shooters that's, he's really been bending my ears about being sponsored, and he's a good shooter, but he shows up, last minute zeros, doesn't talk to anybody, packs up his stuff, and he's out of there.
Yep.
And then he shows up for the match, shoots well,
Right.
interacts with people during the match, but immediately after the match,
He's gone.
I'm taking my trophy, I'm getting my car, and I'm out.
Right.
And so he's never making those connections, and that's kind of what I've been telling him about, making connections with people, because that's what it is. You've got to, the brand you're trying to represent has got to have faith in you as a person and who you are, and if they never meet that person, they don't understand you, then you have no chance.
Right. Yep.
You guys know, because I've done it with you guys, I go to a match every time. I'm the last person to leave the award ceremony because I'm talking to people. And the reality is, I love it. I just like talking to people. I really like hearing their story, what they're doing.
Right.
I'm not trying to sell them barrels. I just want to meet people and talk to them. I love that about this.
That's why we have long conversations on the phone. We talk, because I'm the same way. He usually has to be like, babe, we gotta get on the road. But I really enjoy the fellowship of what we do. Meeting people, hearing their stories, and now we're even to the point where we're hearing people say, "Thank you for your video," and then you take a few minutes to talk to them, and it makes their whole trip. It's worth it for them, getting to know them.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it? So I think it starts there, right? Get to know people, talk to people who are sponsored, get to know people who make decisions about, sponsorship. There's the podcasts I did with Travis. You mentioned those. I think this is going to be a great resource, I hope, for people. And,
Sure.
We do too.
And who knows, maybe if there's a ton of questions, we can circle back and do short video answering questions. But I think there's some other resources out there, and who knows, we might have some other things that grow out of all this too.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of things that people should do. What are some of the common things that people shouldn't do that you see? Some kind of pitfalls that you see?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest one is understanding how you carry yourself at a match, both when you're shooting and when you're not, is the single most important thing. When I see shooters who either, at match get-togethers or on the clock are yelling at ROs or yelling at other shooters or just basically being kind of jerks, that's going to be tough. We won't add those people
Sure.
to the proof team. We just won't. I've had that conversation with every single person. You guys can attest to this about how important that is to us, and we won't add anybody that we think has that kind of personality. And then if they do, either we're going to have some mentoring, and if that doesn't work, they're probably going to be gone. So I think that's the biggest pitfall, is understanding that every single moment you've got that logo on, right? You're representing that brand. Also, in your personal life and in particularly social media, that's very important. And some brands don't care. You can do whatever you want. But other brands feel like when you're out in the social space or in the public eye, you have that brand on all the time. Mm-hmm. And that includes your social media and what you're liking and what you're responding to and what you're posting. And my advice to you is, if you don't want to do that, if you have the feeling like, I'm an adult, don't tell me what to do, being sponsored is probably not for you. Or at the very least, have a conversation with the company that wants to sponsor you and say, listen, I just want you to know, I want to be able to say whatever I want on social media.
Right.
Even if that contradicts your message, your culture, what you're about, I want to say what I want. If you don't like that, then don't sponsor me. At least have that conversation.
Right.
Sure. Okay. You have anything else you wanted to cover?
No, that's it. Just on that point, I firmly believe in that point. And circling back to a couple of the other things that we've talked about, is you never know who's watching. For me as a lady shooter, I have young women following me, and it kind of shocks me, but they're looking up to me. They're looking at me as an example. And so for me, I try and keep that in the front of my mind on social media and when I am out at events like this representing people. So I'm really big on that point.
Yeah. So in summation, we covered, expectations of being a sponsored shooter. It's not all teddy bears and rainbows and money from the heavens. It's a job, basically.
Right.
And you are working for the marketing department, and I think you have to view it that way. Right. It needs to be a mutually beneficial relationship for both you and the brand you're representing, because if it's a one-way relationship, it's not going to last long term, and there's going to be frustrations there. And then we covered some do's and don'ts, and really it just boils down to be a genuine person, be yourself, and be a good person.
Right.
So, Chris, I greatly appreciate you taking time away to sit down and talk with us. I know we're waiting to go do the Slingshot Championship for Cameo. For those of you guys at home, we're at the Comp Expo 2021. It's a fantastic event that's going on. It's like a mini trade show. And there's incredible events. You've got Total Archery Challenge. You've got World 3-Gun Championships. You have the NRL Hunter Championships, and then a Sporting's Clay competition as well. And trade shows and vendors and industry representatives from all across the industry. If you can, make sure you get it on your calendar for 2022. I think next year is going to be huge. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. And to circle back to our topic, if you're wanting to make those industry connections, these are the kind of events you need to get to. Yes. So, Chris, thank you for your time, and we really appreciate having you on. And guys, thanks for watching at home, and we'll see you out there soon.